What is up, guys? It is Tool Guy Y here, and today I'll be showing you guys how to do front brakes on a 2014 Maserati Ghibli. Let's get into it. Alright guys, let's start the repair by opening your hood. Your hood release is located on the left hand side by the kick panel. Once the hood's open, find and locate the panel that's covering the brake fluid reservoir. Unscrew the cap to the reservoir and put that to the side. When we compress the brake calipers, brake fluid will come out of the reservoir. Now is a good time to push some towels around the opening to prevent a mess. Using a 17mm socket, remove 5 lug studs that are holding the wheel to the car. Because these are lug studs, I do recommend loosening the first one but leaving it on couple threads. By doing this, we are ensuring that the wheel won't fall off when we remove the other 4 lug studs. Using a 10mm socket or ratchet, remove one 10mm bolt holding down the brake hose to the strut. Once the bolts are removed, wiggle off the bracket and put it to the side so it's out of your way. Next, remove 2 10mm bolts that are holding down the bracket on the spindle that hold down the ABS wheel speed sensor and the brake hose. This will give us a little more clearance when removing the caliper and hanging it up on the side. Using a very small punch and a hammer, find the upper pin and punch it out slowly towards the inner fender well. Do this carefully because the plate underneath is actually under tension. As the pin makes its way out, the plate will slowly put more and more tension on it, and it'll feel like the pin is getting harder to pull out. If that happens, grab your finger and push down the plate while pulling out the pin. Slowly let off the plate so it doesn't fly off anywhere. Do the same for the bottom pin. It will be a lot easier because the plate is no longer under tension, so it will slide out a lot easier. Once it's out, put the pin and the plate on the side. Using a 13mm socket, remove the bolt holding down the bar going across in the middle. Once the bolt is off, pull out the bar so that we can remove the pads. If your bar is stuck like mine due to old brake dust, brake grease, or dirt, we can still remove it by softly tapping it with a hammer out. Once you break it free, you can pull it out by hand. In order to retract the caliper pistons, we are going to need a dual piston compressor tool. If you guys don't have that tool, don't worry, we could still get the job done with 2 flathead screwdrivers. For this method, what you guys are going to want to do is wedge that flathead screwdriver between one side of the rotor and the pads. Once you have it wedged in there, pull towards you so you're putting pressure on the rotor. By doing this, the piston is forcefully getting retracted back in. The technique I like to use is I start from the top, then make my way to the bottom, then make my way to the middle. This way, both pistons are compressed evenly and flat. Once one side's in, start on the next side. Keep in mind, as you push one in, the opposite side is going to want to compress out against the rotor. To prevent this, keep pressure on the already retracted piston while prying and retracting on the opposite side. Once both sides are all the way retracted and the pistons are completely in, pull out the pads. Grab that caliper hanger and then hang it up. Using a Hex 10, remove 2 bolts holding the caliper down to the spindle. I recommend loosening the bottom one till it's holding on by a couple threads, then taking off the top one. By leaving one on, we'll make sure that the caliper doesn't suddenly drop when both of them are removed. Once both bolts are removed, hang up your caliper on your caliper hanger so it's out of the way. Next, we're going to remove the bolt holding on the rotor to the hub. Sometimes that bolt that holds on the rotor is very tight. To get around that, I like to use this trick. Take a hammer and hit the rotor around the area where the bolt is located. Then take your 5mm hex and remove the bolt. In this video, I'm using an impact gun to remove the bolt. If you guys don't have an impact gun, you are going to need someone to hold the brakes in the beginning before taking apart the brakes and remove it by hand to prevent the rotor from spinning. I will also pin this up in the beginning and in the comment section below. Add one lug stud on so that when you hit the rotor, it doesn't fall off, and grab that hammer once more and give that rotor a good whack. Once the rotor is loosened, remove it by hand and put it to the side. Grab a brush and clean off all the dirt and dust off the caliper. Make sure to focus on where the caliper and the pads touch. Take a can of brake clean and spray the caliper clean. Then give it a minute to fully dry. When it's dry, grab some lube and lube up all the places where the caliper and pads contact. I like to lube up the 4 places where the pads slide and the caliper pistons where the caliper pistons touch the back of the pads. Take your new rotor and douse that thing in brake clean. When the rotors are stored, it's covered in oil to prevent rust. We need to get rid of all that oil before installing and putting the pads on. For reinstallation, reinstall in reverse order, starting with putting back the rotor. Once the rotor's on, reinstall the bolt to hold it in place. Reinstall the caliper, then reinstall the 2 bolts holding it down in place. I do recommend threading those bolts in by hand first to prevent cross-threading. Once it's threaded in a couple turns, then you can finish off with a ratchet or an impact gun. Slide the 2 new pads in, then reinstall the bar, then secure it down with a 13mm bolt. Once that bar is back in place, reinstall the plate, long side down, short side up, then install both pins. When you reinstall those pins, make sure you put it in the same way that you took it out. Install it from the inner fender well out. Lastly, reinstall 2 10mm bolts holding down the bracket for the wheel speed sensor to the spindle. Then one more 10mm bolt holding down the brake line to the strut. Reinstall the wheel and cap off the brake fluid reservoir and you're done. For this video, I'm only doing one side because the other side is exactly the same. So if you're planning on doing the other side as well, follow the same steps and you'll get it done. Congratulations guys, you now know how to do front brakes on a 2014 Maserati Ghibli. If you liked or found this video informative, please support me by smashing that like button and subscribing to my channel for more how-to and tool review videos. Also check me out on Instagram at ToolGuyY where I post daily. Thank you guys again for watching and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Shoots!